Hello, and welcome to the M.O.W. channel. Between 1968 and 1969, in Salem, Oregon, a serial killer kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and murdered 4 young women. He was also a necrophile, later becoming known as the Lust Killer and the Shoe Fetish Killer. Today, we will be talking about the case of Jerry Brudos. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Now, let's begin today's story. Jerome Henry Brudos was born on January 31, 1939. In the small town of Webster, South Dakota. His parents were Marie Eileen Aldridge and Henry Irvin Brudos. He was the younger of 2 sons, the second and last child in the family. From the moment he was born, he was seen as a disappointment in his mother's eyes. Marie had wanted a daughter throughout her pregnancy, and when she learned she had given birth to a boy, she made little effort to hide her dissatisfaction. From infancy, Brudos grew up under his mother's cold gaze and open resentment. She repeatedly told him, "I never wanted you," and in everyday conversations, she praised his older brother James while subtly belittling Jerome. This behavior went beyond simple disappointment and developed into ongoing emotional abuse. The Brudos household was frugal and deeply religious. His father, Henry, worked various seasonal and farm jobs to support the family, while his mother remained a full-time homemaker. Henry was short-tempered and quiet, but he rarely physically punished his children or used harsh words. Marie, on the other hand, was strict, authoritarian, and obsessed with rules. Most of her criticism and frustration were directed at Jerome. James excelled in school and was popular, becoming the pride of the family. Jerome, by contrast, was constantly compared to his brother and grew up with a deep sense of inferiority. He longed for his mother's affection, but that affection never came. As a child, Brudos was sickly and introverted. He suffered from frequent sore throats and migraines and struggled to make friends. His academic performance was below average, and he never stood out the way his brother did. He lived as an invisible presence. At one point, however, a woman living in the neighborhood, close to his age, showed him unusual warmth. She welcomed him whenever he visited and listened to his stories. Brudos came to feel that she was his true mother, and later claimed that he imagined she actually was his biological mother. But she developed severe diabetes, and her declining health forced her to stop seeing children. Soon after, another girl his age died from tuberculosis. These 2 losses deeply traumatized young Brudos. He experienced grief at an early age, and it pushed him further away from the world. Because of his father's unstable employment, the family moved frequently. They drifted through rural towns in the Pacific Northwest, before eventually settling on farmland near Salem, Oregon. Brudos spent his elementary and middle school years there. Yet even in this new environment, he remained isolated. He struggled to connect with his peers and rarely participated in extracurricular activities. For a short time, he served as a treasurer in a youth club, one of the few moments when he showed initiative, but even that involvement did not last long. Life at home grew increasingly oppressive. His mother scolded him loudly over minor mistakes and sometimes refused to speak to him for days. Brudos learned to survive by staying quiet and constantly reading her mood. He spent more and more time alone in his room, retreating into his inner world. When his brother James left home to prepare for college, Jerome's loneliness deepened. Whenever James returned, their mother showered him with attention while pushing Jerome further into the background. This imbalance further distorted Jerome's sense of self. He began searching elsewhere for the warmth he never received from his mother. But most women treated him like a child and showed no genuine interest. Over time, he developed complex and conflicting feelings toward women, longing for closeness while simultaneously fearing rejection. His mother's constant dismissal and comparisons eroded his self-esteem and bred a deep distrust of the world. Gradually, he withdrew further from others and sank deeper into his fantasies. As a child, Jerome Brudos embodied the archetype of an unloved boy. Growing up under his mother's cold treatment and constant comparison to his brother, he came to believe he was worthless. His fragile health, isolation, and unstable upbringing narrowed his world and nurtured the darkness within him. Even after settling in Salem, his loneliness never faded. These early experiences were not merely childhood memories, they became the foundation of his personality and desires. The rejection he felt from his mother evolved into a distorted view of women as a whole, leaving scars that never healed. Jerome Brudos's early life was a tragic beginning, defined by emotional deprivation and a desperate need for recognition that was never fulfilled. Jerome Brudos's obsession with shoes and feet went far beyond a childhood curiosity. It evolved into a compulsive desire that would dominate his entire life. The earliest known moment of this fixation dates back to when he was around 5 years old. While visiting a family friend's home, the family's teenage daughter had suddenly fallen ill and was resting in Brudos's bed. The adults agreed it was fine for her to lie down there temporarily. Left alone in the room, young Brudos stood quietly and watched her. She was asleep, still wearing her high heels. The shine of the shoes and the curve of the heels completely captivated him. He slowly approached and reached out to remove one of the shoes, but the girl woke up, startled, and chased him out of the room. That brief moment of contact, followed by rejection, left a powerful impression on Brutus. Long after that day, he replayed the scene in his mind again and again, feeling a strange mix of excitement and frustration. Later that same winter, Brutus encountered another pivotal moment. In a rundown junkyard behind his neighborhood, he discovered a dusty box containing a pair of black leather high heels decorated with sparkling rhinestones. The moment he touched them, his heart began to race. He secretly brought them home and tried them on in silence. The tight fit and the cold texture of the leather sent a shiver through his body. Wanting to show them to his mother, he walked into the living room wearing the shoes. Marie's face twisted with anger the moment she saw him. She screamed that he was doing something disgusting, ripped the shoes off his feet, and threw them outside. Through tears, Brutus obeyed her order to return the shoes, but inside, a powerful desire had already taken root. He wanted them back more than anything. A few days later, his mother was cleaning his room when she discovered pieces of shoes he had hidden away. Enraged, she summoned Brutus and forced him to stand in the middle of the room. Right in front of him, she burned the shoes. As the flames rose, Brutus stood there, crying, the smell of burning leather filling the air and carving a deep emotional wound into his mind. This punishment did not extinguish his desire, it intensified it. The shoes his mother destroyed became a symbol of permanent loss, fueling both grief and an overwhelming urge to reclaim what had been taken from him. 2 years later, when Brutus was in first grade, his attention was once again drawn to high heels, this time, his teacher's. After class, while the teacher briefly left the room, he crawled under her desk and stole one of her shoes. He was caught when she returned. Brutus broke down in tears and apologized. When asked why he had done it, he could not answer. Even he did not understand his behavior. All he knew was that holding the shoe made him feel as if the world belonged entirely to him, if only for a moment. As he entered adolescence, his fixation expanded beyond shoes to women's underwear and lingerie. He became close friends with a boy who had 3 older sisters and frequently visited their house. The boy enjoyed sneaking into his sisters' rooms and rummaging through their underwear drawers, and Brutus soon joined him. At first, it felt like harmless mischief, but the moment Brutus touched the soft fabric and sensed the faint, intimate scent, a powerful sensation ran through his body. He did not understand what he was feeling, but he could not stop himself. From then on, whenever he had the chance, he stole women's underwear from neighbors' homes or areas near his school. He hid these items in corners of his room or storage spaces, taking them out at night to touch and examine them. Sometimes he secretly tried them on. Each time, he experienced intense sexual arousal. To Brutus, shoes and lingerie were not merely objects. They were tools through which he could indirectly possess and control women. He lacked the confidence to approach women in real life, so he projected his desires onto these items instead. Holding a pair of shoes, he imagined the woman who had worn them, her feet, her legs, and felt as though he were caressing her. Pressing underwear to his face and inhaling deeply, he fantasized that the woman's presence surrounded him. These behaviors became more frequent, gradually taking a central place in his daily life. This fetish went beyond preference and began to reshape his psychological structure. No normal romantic interaction or emotional relationship could fill the emptiness inside him. Only indirect contact through objects provided relief. The wounds left by his mother's rejection and abuse transformed into complex emotions toward women as a whole, and shoes and lingerie became safe targets for projection. By possessing parts of women, he sought the validation and sense of control he had never received from his mother. Over time, this desire deepened and became the axis around which his entire life revolved. Even at this stage, Brutus had a vague awareness that his desires were abnormal, but rather than producing guilt, that awareness drove him to indulge in them more secretly. He began to store stolen items more carefully, arranging them and deriving satisfaction simply from looking at them. In this process, his fetish hardened into a compulsive ritual. Shoes and feet became the most powerful sexual symbols in his mind, forces that would ultimately shape and drive all of his future actions. As Brutus entered puberty, his sexual curiosity exploded alongside the physical changes in his body. But unlike other boys his age, he couldn't naturally socialize with girls. He was tall and had severe acne, which left him insecure about his appearance, and he was so quiet that he struggled to keep conversations going. All he could do was watch girls from a distance in the school hallways. He never had the courage to approach them or strike up a conversation. Instead, he became consumed with fantasizing about naked women. Though he had no real experience, increasingly vivid and detailed scenes played out in his mind. Around 1953, he started masturbating for the first time. However, he later recalled that he never experienced ejaculation. Wet dreams occurred frequently, and every morning he dreaded his mother's scolding when she discovered the stains on his sheets. Whenever Marie spotted these marks, she would call Brutus over, make him do the laundry, and humiliate him. This process felt less like simple cleaning and more like a ritual designed to brand his sexual behavior as dirty and wrong. He began seeking out increasingly secretive times and places to satisfy his urges. Starting in his early teens, Brutus progressed from merely observing women around him to stalking them. In the evenings, he would wander through neighborhood alleys, watching houses where light seeped through the windows. Sometimes he would secretly take photographs. Polaroid cameras weren't common yet at the time, but he would sneak his father's old camera and capture women's silhouettes from a distance. He hid the stolen underwear and shoes in corners of his room or behind the barn, taking them out to fondle every night. These behaviors weren't yet violent, but they were gradually morphing into desires for force and possession. By his mid-teens, his fantasies had grown much darker. They moved beyond simply watching to repeated scenes of forcibly subduing women, stripping them, and photographing them. He felt a powerful urge to have women under his control. Around age 16, Brutus dug out a small underground space near the family farm. He camouflaged the entrance with branches and dirt, and furnished the interior with a small mirror and a blanket. This was an imaginary prison where he would keep captive women. He would sit there for hours, picturing himself dragging someone there and locking them up. He never actually brought anyone there, but the fantasy alone gave him intense satisfaction. That same year, he took real action for the first time. He lured a neighborhood girl into a bedroom in his house under some harmless pretense. Once she was inside, Brutus stepped away briefly, then reappeared wearing a mask and holding a knife. He ordered her to undress, took several photographs, then fled. A few minutes later, he returned in his regular clothes with his hair messed up and scratch marks on his cheek, putting on an act that an intruder had locked him in the barn. The girl was terrified but fell for Brutus's performance. This success emboldened him. Afterward, he repeated the same method on girls around his age or younger. He would typically threaten them with a knife, drag them to the farm barn, make them undress, and photograph them. After the photo session, he would briefly lock the girls in the corn crib, then reappear in different clothes with a changed hairstyle. He would introduce himself as Ed, Jerry's twin brother, and explain that Jerry was receiving psychiatric treatment. Pretending to be concerned about what happened to the girl, he would say that Jerry would be devastated by this incident and beg her not to tell anyone. Most of the girls experienced nothing more than light groping and went home trembling with fear. Hardly any of them reported what happened. Brutus believed this charade allowed him to completely evade responsibility. The twin brother's story was his cunning defense mechanism. Even as he committed violence, he felt as though someone else, not him, was responsible. During this period, his actions became increasingly systematic. His eye for selecting victims, his tone when luring them, his methods of intimidation, even the angles he used for photographs, everything seemed premeditated. In April 1956, Brutus arranged a date with a 17-year-old girl. He drove her to a remote back road and demanded she undress. When she refused, he dragged her out of the car and beat her, breaking her nose. A young couple driving by heard her screams and stopped to intervene. Brutus initially claimed the girl had fallen out of the car, then quickly changed his story, insisting that some stranger had attacked him. But his clumsy lies didn't hold up. The couple took both of them to the police station. During the police investigation, Brutus admitted to the assault, but claimed he had only threatened her to take photographs. A search of his room uncovered an extensive collection of women's clothing and numerous Polaroid photos of teenage girls. One of the earlier victims came forward and testified about the twin brother scheme, exposing his methods. Brutus was transferred to the Polk County Juvenile Division, and with that, his early criminal behavior officially came to light. During this period, Brutus's behavior expanded, beyond satisfying his fetishes into desires for domination and coercion. He became increasingly addicted to turning his fantasies of possessing and controlling women into reality. His distorted desires, combined with the hormonal changes of puberty, made his inner world even more dangerous. Instead of normal dating or social interaction, a pattern of fulfilling his urges through threats and theatrical deception became ingrained. These early crimes were clear precursors to the far more extreme violence that would follow. On April 16, 1956, Brutus was classified as a juvenile offender and transferred to Oregon State Hospital. There, he underwent psychiatric evaluation and treatment for 9 months. The hospital allowed him to go home only on weekends and during school breaks, so he could attend high school. During his hospitalization, he underwent multiple psychological tests and interviews, and the final diagnosis was depression with schizoid personality disorder. However, The doctors concluded that he showed no signs of delusions or severe schizophrenic symptoms. The most notable finding was that his sexual fantasies were centered around deep hatred and anger toward his mother and women in general. Hospital records indicated that Brudos couldn't hide his intense hostility toward his mother and repeatedly imagined scenarios where women rejected him. During treatment, he tried to make excuses for his behavior, but the attending physicians recognized the complex emotions toward women that had taken root inside him. After discharge, he returned to his parents' home and appeared to resume a normal life. In 1957, Brudos graduated from Corvallis High School. He received his diploma with unremarkable grades, ranking 142nd out of 202 graduates. Throughout his school years, he remained an inconspicuous student. He had hardly any friends, and even his teachers didn't particularly remember him. After graduation, he didn't immediately look for work and stayed at his parents' house. In March 1959, he enlisted in the Army and trained as a communications technician. He showed exceptional talent in electronics and radio communications, and his problem-solving skills were recognized among his fellow soldiers. However, his military service passed without anything remarkable. The only thing that stood out was his repeated telling of an absurd story about a beautiful Korean girl who secretly climbed into his bed every night to have sex with him. His fellow soldiers teased him as a daydreamer. In October 1959, military authorities deemed him psychologically unfit for service and discharged him early. After his discharge, Brudos returned to his parents' home in Corvallis, Oregon. He soon got a job as an electrical engineer at a local radio station. He had technical certifications and demonstrated excellent job performance. His coworkers regarded him as a diligent and mild-mannered employee. However, he showed no ambition for advancement. He simply handled his assigned tasks quietly, without aspiring to higher positions. While working at the radio station, he immersed himself in technical problem-solving and maintained only minimal relationships with those around him. At home, he remained under his mother's control. While his brother James was away at college, Brudos was allowed to use the second bedroom, but whenever James came home, he was banished to the shed. This unfair treatment added another wound to his psyche. Around 1960, Brudos spotted a young woman wearing revealing clothes on a dark street. He secretly followed her to an apartment in downtown Salem. Late that night, he broke into the apartment, choked the woman unconscious, stole her shoes, and fled. The woman was not raped, but the marks left on her neck caused her tremendous terror. Shortly afterward, he spotted another attractive woman wearing high heels and attempted something similar. This time, however, the woman fought back violently, and Brudos escaped with only one shoe. He was not arrested for either incident and kept the stolen shoes hidden in a corner of the shed. Every night, he would hold the shoes while sleeping and feel intense satisfaction. In the summer of 1961, Brudos met Ralphine Schwindler through a teenage boy he knew from the Corvallis radio station. Ralphine was a bright, shy 17-year-old girl. The boy teased Brudos about being shy around women and introduced him to Ralphine. Brudos was awkward at first, but gradually opened up to Ralphine's gentle personality. The two quickly grew close, and on September 30th, 1961, they married while Ralphine was 1 month pregnant. The newlyweds initially lived in an apartment in downtown Portland and moved to a small single-family home in the suburbs of Salem in the summer of 1968. This house had a spacious garage and basement, making it suitable for Brudos to use as a personal workspace. On the surface, the marriage appeared normal. A daughter, Teresa, was born in 1962, and a son, Brian, was born in 1967. Brudos supplemented the family income by repairing neighbors' cars in the garage on weekends. He never physically abused his wife Ralphine, but he made strange demands from the early days of their marriage. He had Ralphine walk around the house doing chores wearing nothing but high heels and photographed her from multiple angles before sex. Ralphine was initially taken aback by her husband's proclivities, but complied and accepted them over the years. During this period, Brudos did not commit any sexual offenses outside the home. However, things changed in the mid-1960s. As their daughter Teresa became a toddler, Ralphine began refusing to engage in such behavior in front of the child. Brudos started gaining weight and lost confidence in his appearance. Ralphine noticed the changes in her husband but didn't let on. Sexual relations between the couple grew less frequent, and Ralphine spent more time with her daughter and friends. Brudos spent increasingly more time in the garage workshop. He immersed himself in disassembling and reassembling electronic equipment or fixing radios. During this period, he minimized contact with the outside world and delved deeper into his inner self. In May 1967, while Ralphine was hospitalized to give birth to their second child, Brudos once again couldn't suppress his urges. He secretly followed a young woman wearing attractive high heels and broke into her apartment. He knocked her unconscious, raped her, stole her high heels, and fled. This incident was a signal that the desires dormant within him had resurfaced. The following year, in 1968, he was arrested by Corvallis police for stealing women's clothing near the Oregon State University women's dormitory grounds. At the time of his arrest, he was wearing pedal pushers, high heels, and women's underwear. This incident demonstrated that his deviant tendencies were spiraling out of control. As a young adult, Brudos outwardly appeared to be an ordinary man, with a stable job and family, but his inner desires were not suppressed by marriage and routine. Instead, they grew deeper and more intense. He imposed his fetishes on his wife, but as she increasingly refused, his loneliness and anger mounted. The garage and workshop were his only sanctuary, and would soon become the stage for his crimes. This period was a transitional phase in which Brudos wore a social mask, while his inner darkness slowly built toward the breaking point. Starting in early 1968, Brudos's crimes escalated beyond his previous levels of theft and assault into the realm of taking lives. He was no longer content with simply stealing items or taking photographs. He became consumed by an intense compulsion to have young women completely under his control. During this period, the garage and basement of his home became secret spaces, sealed off from the outside world, fitted with an intercom and locks to keep his family out. Brudos called this place his workshop and committed most of his crimes there. The first murder occurred on January 26, 1968. 19-year-old Linda Slauson was working as a door-to-door encyclopedia saleswoman and happened to knock on Brudos's door after getting the wrong address while passing near his house. The moment Brudos saw the red high heels she was wearing, he felt a surge of compulsion. Pretending to be interested in buying encyclopedias, he lured her into the basement and struck her head with a wooden board. When Slauson collapsed, he strangled her to death. He immediately called his mother and asked her to take the children out for hamburgers to get them out of the house. Going down to the basement, Brudos stripped the body and became excited when he discovered red underwear. He retrieved boxes of women's clothing and shoes he had hidden in the shed and repeatedly dressed and undressed the corpse, photographing it each time. Several hours later, he sawed off her left foot and stored it behind the family freezer. The rest of the body was tied to a heavy cylindrical piece of concrete and dumped somewhere on the outskirts of Marion County. He later stated that he couldn't remember the exact location. On November 26 of the same year, Brudos spotted 23-year-old Jan Whitney standing beside her broken-down Rambler on his way home from work. Whitney accepted Brudos's offer when he asked if he could help fix her car, and got into his vehicle. After dropping off two hitchhikers who had been riding along, Brudos took Whitney to his garage. Pretending to go get tools, he walked around to the back of the car and strangled her from behind with a leather strap. After raping the body in the car, he moved it to his workshop and hung it from a ceiling pulley for 2 days. Whenever he felt the urge, he would come down to fondle the body, dress it in various underwear and shoes, and photograph it. He attempted to cut off one breast and coat it in epoxy, but when it failed to harden, he stuffed it with sawdust and mounted it on a wooden board. The body was tied to a scrap railroad plate and dumped in the Willamette River. On March 27, 1969, Brudos abducted 18-year-old Oregon State University student Karen Sprinker from the Meyer and Frank department store parking lot. Dressed in women's clothing and carrying a gun, he approached Sprinker, put her in his car, and drove her to his house. In the workshop, he forced her to undress, then raped and photographed her. He tied her hands behind her back and wrapped a rope around her neck. When he hoisted the rope over a ceiling beam and pulled, Sprinker struggled before dying. Brudos spent several hours committing acts of necrophilia with the body. He cut off her breasts in an attempt to make plastic molds, and the body was tied to a 6-cylinder engine head and dumped in the river. In April 1969, Brudos made 2 more abduction attempts. On April 21, he threatened 24-year-old Sharon Wood with a gun in an underground parking garage in Portland. Wood bit his hand, kicked him, and turned the gun away from herself, managing to escape. The next day, 15-year-old Gloria Jean Smith was about to be dragged into a Volkswagen Carmen Ghia when she screamed for help from nearby residents and escaped. These 2 incidents gave police a description of the suspect. The final murder occurred on April 23, 1969. 22-year-old Linda Saley had finished shopping at Lloyd Center Mall and was walking back to her car when she was abducted by Brudos, who flashed a fake police badge. Pretending to arrest her, he took her to his garage. When his wife appeared at the front door and said dinner was ready, Brudos tied Saley up in the garage and had dinner with his family. After the meal, he returned and strangled her to death. He hung the body from the pulley and inserted needles near the armpits, attempting to run electrical current through the body to make it move, but failed. He kept the body for 24 hours, committing necrophilia once more, then tied it to a transmission and dumped it in the river. Brudos's killing methods followed a consistent pattern. Most were opportunistic, But once he selected a target, he executed his plan thoroughly. He raped his victims, strangled them to death, then decorated the bodies as if they were mannequins and documented them with photographs. The necrophilia and dismemberment were extreme expressions of his need for domination and his fetishes. The severed feet and breasts were stored in the freezer or workshop, functioning as his possessions. Body disposal always took place in the Willamette River Basin, with car parts or metal plates used as weights to sink them below the surface. This string of murders demonstrated that Brudos's desires had spiraled completely out of control. He could no longer find satisfaction in covert theft or assault, only in taking lives. Did he feel a complete sense of release? The garage was his kingdom, and his family was forbidden to enter. As the number of crimes increased, he grew bolder, and ultimately, he was caught in the police dragnet, unable to cover his tracks. This pattern of habitual offenses spanning 1968 to 1969, claimed 4 lives and resulted in at least 2 attempted abductions. His actions had gone beyond simple sexual compulsion, they had transformed into a desire for total possession and destruction. That's all for today's story. Please hit the subscribe and like buttons. Thank you for watching.